Hi, and welcome to the Mindful Living Summit. I'm Ann Alexander, the Content Director for Mindful, and I'll be your host for this session. I'm so happy to be here today with Diana Winston. We're going to explore mindfulness, working with everyday challenges, and specifically how to practice forgiveness. Diana is the Director of Mindfulness Education at UCLA's Mindful Awareness Research Center. She's the author of The Little Book of Being, Practices and Guidance for Uncovering Your Natural Awareness. Diana has been teaching mindfulness since 1999 in a variety of settings, including hospitals, universities, corporations, nonprofits, and schools in Asia and the US. She's also a founding board member of the International Mindfulness Teachers Associations. Thank you so much for being here, Diana. It's great to see you.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's get started. We have so many questions to ask. And let's just begin with the beginning. So what is forgiveness, and why is forgiveness something that we really want to consider in living mindfully?
Well, we live in a world today where I think forgiveness could go a very long way. And whether that's personal forgiveness of ourselves, because sometimes we need to forgive ourselves. And then forgiveness, it could be forgiveness of people in our lives. It could be a larger, broader, systemic forgiveness that I think needs to happen. But forgiveness is really about letting go of the past, of the resentment and blame that we've been holding on from the past, and putting it down, like putting down that burden and being willing to open to the possibility of a shift in a relationship to these things that we carry. So it's definitely, I always say this, it's not for the faint of heart. It's not an easy practice to do. It uses mindfulness. That's one of the reasons I teach it kind of like as a complementary practice to mindfulness.
And so what about some of the long-term benefits? You've talked about the science of mindfulness and forgiveness. So what, in the long term, how does it help us?
In the long term, when they've done research studies looking at people who practice forgiveness in a regular way, they see significantly more resiliency in life, less anxiety, less depression, more kind of general sense of well-being. And so if you think about it, just think about it kind of in a practical sense. It's like if we're consumed by this anger that we're carrying about, something that happened in third grade or something, it's like sitting with us, and we're living our lives with that thing, or blaming someone, or they let me down. I can never forgive them for the way they let me down. And who does it affect? It doesn't really affect them. It affects us, right? So when we can learn to practice forgiveness, and it really is a practice, and we can talk about it, there's a tremendous relief that begins to happen from all the burdens that we've been carrying. We're suddenly beginning to put them down.
So what are some of the signs or feelings that somebody might have that says, "Ooh, I think I need some forgiveness in my life"?
Repetitive, pernicious thinking that where someone is sort of like the focus of your thinking, like, oh, blaming them, blaming yourself. I mean, oftentimes, and I said this kind of briefly before, but oftentimes the forgiveness we need to do is for ourselves, either forgiving ourselves for something that we've done to someone else, or just a general sense of forgiveness. So forgiveness can happen in three parts. So we can practice asking forgiveness for things we've done, forgiving others for things they've done for us, and then thirdly, forgiving ourselves. So oftentimes, as you're asking, it's like there's this sense that something doesn't sit right inside me. Like it doesn't feel finished. It feels like I'm holding on to something, or I'm blaming myself. I just like that constant self-blame and self-judgment. All of these are good indicators that a forgiveness practice might be useful.
And you talk about it as a practice, because I think sometimes we think of forgiveness as something that's like once and done. But you describe it as a practice, or is it an ongoing way of living, or is it both?
I would say it's both, but I would definitely not say it's one and done. I think sometimes it's one and done. And when that happens, it's wonderful. Like, oh, someone does something. It's usually a person who it's not too charged around. They do something, you get mad, then you forgive them and we're done. But much of the time, it's not like that. Much of the time, we carry these things with us for long periods of time, especially if it's something major that someone did or something that we did that we feel terrible about. And so it's a practice in that we work at it in different ways, much in the same way we work at a mindfulness practice. Like, we can set an intention to develop forgiveness for this particular situation. And then we can slowly work with it over time, practicing. So I'll at some point in this session, I'll teach a little bit of the forgiveness phrases, but there are words and phrases that you can use, that you can say on a daily basis. You can say it for weeks, months, years. I mean, there's also the forgiveness, the momentary forgiveness. So when, for instance, if you do something and you blame yourself, let's say, I mean, we do this all the time. I'm driving, I cut someone off in traffic. Oh, that was so stupid. I'm such a jerk. And it's like, we can't forgive ourselves. That's an opportunity actually to do some like very gentle forgiving and self-compassion right there on the spot. So, and that's kind of the second category you said. In that way, it's a part of a way of living that we can forgive on the spot over and over, or we can work on something over a long period of time. And it's a little bit like an onion, just to add, it's a little bit like an onion, like you peel the layers and you think you've forgiven, and then boom, something shows up again, and then you have to kind of work on it again. And it's not depressing. As I'm saying that, I'm thinking, oh no, everyone thinks this is going to be depressing, I'm never going to forgive. But actually, it's a beautiful practice in and of itself, where we grow and deepen our understanding, our personal understanding, as we slowly forgive over time.
So Diana, can you walk through for us the three different kinds of forgiveness?
Sure. The first type of forgiveness is forgiving others for things they've done to us. So someone hurt you. It could be recently, it could be way long time ago in your past. And we can set the intention to really want to work on, in a sense, healing this resentment and this blame. But one thing that's important is, it's not excusing the person or condoning it or forgetting what they have done. So we use phrases where we would imagine the situation or the person, bring it to mind, have a sense of it, and then offer phrases like, for ways you have hurt or harmed me, intentionally, unintentionally, I ask your forgiveness. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not right. For ways that I've hurt you intentionally or unintentionally, may I forgive you. And then we can also say, may I one day forgive you. May I consider the possibility of one day forgiving you. So it's really no pressure. This is a slow process where we see what words resonate with us. And once those words resonate, then we can say with it, may I one day forgive you. And we can repeat that over and over. And then notice what happens as we as we say these words. There's often a sense of some of the challenging feelings that are connected to the incident that arises. And that's where we bring our mindfulness to ourselves in that moment, holding ourselves with kindness. Or the anger arises, and we can be aware of that using our mindfulness. So we practice with it and holding like this compassionate space for ourselves as we try to practice forgiving the other, not with a lot of expectation, not assuming that boom, we're going to fix it and they're going to be forgiven forever, but the knowledge that this is a process. We can also do kind of like adjunct things where we might think about what's our part in the situation, or what might they have been feeling or doing at the time that caused them to do it. So there are ways of sort of like opening our mind a little bit to not feel so kind of, locked into the incident. So that's forgiving others. The second one is asking forgiveness for things we've done, right? So we've all done things to hurt people in the past. I mean, there's not a single person who has not hurt another person, right? So, and sometimes we carry it, and it's again, one of the analogies that we often use is like, it's like a hot burning coal that we're carrying. Either it's the blame towards another person or blaming ourselves, or this sense of like, I can't let this go. And it's if you're holding a hot burning coal, it's only hurting you. So it's really about dropping the coal and finding a place of ease and well-being. So with this particular one, we think about ways we might have hurt somebody. And always, by the way, when you start these practices, never pick the hardest one that, the terrible thing that happened that you've been holding on to for your whole life. You want to pick something kind of lighter, less intense to get started, so you learn the practice. So with this one, the phrases are for ways that I've hurt you intentionally or unintentionally. I ask your forgiveness. May I one day be forgiven. May I consider the possibility of one day being forgiven, right? So again, opening up a lot of space so there's no rush around it. But it's also, so as you do it, you're noticing what's happening internally, attending to an inner shift that might happen where we suddenly, not even suddenly, but over time, we might feel a little bit more space, a little bit more compassionate towards them, towards ourselves. The other piece with this is you're not then supposed to like go out and like tell them, I've forgiven you, I've completely forgiven you. So this practice is a little bit more relational. It might be that you want to make some amends of some sort, and people do like write a letter that you never send, or with the help and consult of other people, you might want to write a letter that you do send, or talk to them in some ways. But again, very gently, very slow. And then the third one is forgiving ourselves. And this one, of course, is tangled up in the other two, but this is where we feel into whatever it is that we're holding on. Like it might be something we did, it might be some aspect of ourselves we don't love. And it's just bringing kindness and an open-heartedness to that space of the pain, whatever the pain is, and holding that with compassion and allowing it to be there, and using our mindfulness, our best mindfulness, to be present with ourselves, and saying phrases such as, for ways that I've hurt or harmed others, I forgive myself, or may I one day forgive myself. May I consider the possibility of one day forgiving myself. I forgive myself. And we just do that over and over, and we can do it in the middle of the day. We can do it in the meditation practice. But those are the three different ways of working with it. And then there's sort of like ways of enhancing it, and additional practices like I was describing before, where you kind of contemplate your role in it, or what may have been happening with the other person.
Wow, that sounds tremendously healing. And it also sounds really painful, to go through some of those issues and to just open up the space. I think you've said that this isn't for the faint of heart. Is that true?
Mm-hmm. It is painful, but it's not usually as painful as we think it's going to be. Because oftentimes these are these places that are locked away inside us. And so we have this story like, oh, this is where I was so horrible, or this is where someone was so horrible to me. And so the pain connected to it is just like, it's exacerbated by all the thoughts we have about it. But sometimes what it just requires, and this is not, I would say for people who are just starting out with their mindfulness practice, give this time, get your mindfulness practice to get kind of like stronger and feel more comfortable with it before you do these practices, because being with difficult emotions is hard, right? But you can, when you touch into the pain, and you can bring this compassionate, open, spacious heart to it. And it's really absolutely doable. And we usually find, as I said, the pain isn't as bad as we thought it was. And we have that capacity to be present with it. And it's by being with that challenge that that's what heals it, right? If we keep avoiding the pain, we're going to avoid the issue forever. We're going to tiptoe around it. It's like a part of our heart that's still wounded. But when we come to it gently, and one thing I'll say about being mindful of pain is I never would say to someone like, okay, just be mindful of your pain now, right? That's not how it goes. It's helpful to find another part of our body that is not in pain, such as some place where we're grounded, such as our hands or feet, and just feel our feet on the floor and stay with that. And then when there's pain, and this goes for with forgiveness or anything, just gently come in and test what's, sorry, gently come in and feel what's happening. Oh, there's tightness, there's heaviness, there's burning, there's stabbing, and then go back to where it feels at ease. So it goes back and forth rather than all at once, right? It's kind of it's pendulated. The word is pendulate, like you go back and forth.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense to sort of, I mean, what I'm hearing you say is be conscientious, treat yourself gingerly, that this is difficult territory. Go in gently, have an awareness of where you feel safe, where you feel grounded, and just gently allow yourself to feel the pain, but also allow yourself to go back to that safe zone that you might feel. It sounds like one of the other things somebody contemplating a forgiveness practice might want to consider is also getting caught up in the stories or not getting caught up in the stories. So this person did that to me. Is that where do the stories fit into this?
It takes some time to see where you're entangled in the stories and where you're not. And so usually when we start to want to forgive, we're still somewhat entangled in the story. Well, that person did this to me, or I did that to them. So we can use our mindfulness to become aware of those stories and actually to investigate into them a little bit. Like, is that true? Do I really know what their motivation was, right? Like we can, I call this part of the practice, I'm not sure I'd use this in the course or not, but what I call is enlisting the wisdom mind, right? There's in all of us is this part of us that's wise, that has good common sense. And if we're activated and if we're very triggered into our strong emotions, it's hard to be connected with our wisdom mind. But once we begin to have a little bit of basic mindfulness, then we can investigate the stories a little bit, just like we can use our common sense. Is it really true? Are they the worst person on the planet? Okay, maybe not. So there are ways of working with the thoughts as well.
That's very helpful. And let me ask you a question. One of the things you said was that you want to begin a forgiveness practice when you feel ready or you're aware, I'm holding on to something and maybe it's time to start letting that go. So you start then. You don't start when you're like, I am so angry at that person. This person did me wrong. Do you need to wait till you feel like, I think I'm ready to let that go? Or can you start when you're like, I am so mad that this happened, or I'm sad that this happened? When do you begin?
It's entirely up to you. You just have to have a little bit of I don't know, and an iota of awareness that you want it to be different, right? So you could be like, really, I don't know, my daughter does something and it pisses me off and I can just be like, oh, I'm so mad at her. It would be really good to start working on forgiveness, but I'm still really mad at her, right? So I could be doing it in the moment that I'm even mad. We're all so different, and sometimes we're ready and sometimes we're not ready, and not to push ourselves. That's why I use that phrase, may I consider the possibility of one day. But even if you're using that phrase, there's some readiness, right? Otherwise you're just caught in your resentment, blame, self-blame, whatever it is.
It also sounds like it would be, it sounds like it would also be just false to sort of be like, I'm so mad, but I need to forgive this person.
Yeah.
And then you get caught, it would seem, in this sort of churning of, well, I'm mad, but I should, and da-da-da-da. And it sounds like maybe that's where your mindfulness practice also comes in, to sort of be aware of, well, I'm this, and I'm this, and I'm this, and I'm this. And to be able to sort of see those things, as well as that sort of tinkling of like, okay, maybe I'm ready to go towards forgiveness at some point.
Absolutely. So we can see as you're stating beautifully, like we can see the complexity that's happening in our own hearts and minds, right? And we can hold space for that complexity. And there's no rush. We don't have to solve everything tomorrow. And we definitely don't want to do what you said, which is be fake about it. Okay, I forgive you. Oh, I'm such a good meditator. I forgive everyone. That's nonsense, right? We want to be real and authentic. So, so it's, yeah, it's very individual.
Well, that's really helpful, and it certainly puts it in context, and it certainly describes that this is a practice. You also talked about a shift that happens. And is this something that happens over time, that you have a more forgiving nature? Do you then not get so angry or so hurt when things happen? Does this sort of protect you, if you will, from future hurts?
It's a little hard to say. I've experienced that and I've seen it with students, but I can't say that that's what happens with everybody. There's, it's like you can work on it, work on it, work on it, and then suddenly there's a shift. So it's like sudden versus gradual. Sometimes it's sudden, but it's based on gradual work. What I've seen with students is that there's really this intention that's developed in their hearts and minds that is about, like, I want to, like, well, let me say this. I often ask the question, what kind of mind do you want to have? Do you want to have a mind that's holding on to these hot coals, that's resenting, blaming, and self-blaming, right? Or do you want to have a mind that has peace and ease and well-being? And students, after practicing mindfulness for a while, they're like, "Ooh, that one sounds better." And so you start to live your life with the intention to be more forgiving, with the intention to be more compassionate, because you know that that is a way better way to live than the other way. So I definitely would say that changes. How quickly we are at forgiving, it depends on the severity of the situation. It depends on many, many factors. Yeah.
So wait, that sounds great, because then it's almost as if what you're saying is then you're not intentionally going out of your way to go pick up the hot coals. So you're sort of saying, you know what, that the guy who cut me off in traffic, he's just not worth it. He's not worth holding on to the hot coal for him.
That's right. That's right. I was driving, I was driving recently, and something happened where, there was there was like a barricade. And so I had to inch over to the other lane. And then this guy drove past me, honked, and then he was in a convertible and he started yelling at me and going, "Ah!" Like, and I kept thinking, oh my God, I had no choice and whatever. And my friend, who's a meditation teacher, was sitting in the car next to me, and she just looked at me and goes, he just can't let go, you know? And that's it. I mean, it was him, but it could have been me, right? Like sometimes we can let go and sometimes we can't let go. And forgiveness is really about letting go, which is the depth practice of mindfulness. We're learning again and again to let go of the dramas and the stories and the challenging emotions and come back to this moment and let go into more and more freedom.
I love the image of the guy in the convertible, because that's all of us. We're all like top down, like expressing our emotions. and, and
Totally.
it's terrible because we're all on display, and we're not only like feeling this, but we're sharing this and we're bringing this into the rooms where we exist, and it's a wonderful image. Do you want to be riding a convertible, enjoying the sunshine, or do you want to be driving your convertible, sort of fuming at the world? That's a great image. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
In terms of sharing, we'd love if you could lead us through a practice, and just really help us walk the walk.
Okay, so because it's like, it's a long process of, many different ways of doing it, I'm just going to do like an introduction for people to explore if they even want to forgive. How about that? Okay, great. So just find a way to settle back in a comfortable, relaxed position, taking a few breaths. Noticing what's happening right here in your body and mind. And so there are many ways to forgive, and we're just going to very gently explore where you might want to forgive, and even if you want to forgive. So think about, are there ways that you have been hurt by others? And does something specific pop into your mind? Ways that you've been hurt by others. And don't pick the hardest thing that ever happened to you, but maybe something very, very, moderate or minor, but there's something that you're holding on to right now. Somebody hurt you. And so let's just experiment and see what happens if we say the phrase, for ways you've hurt or harmed me, intentionally or unintentionally, and you can repeat this in your mind. May I forgive you. May I one day forgive you. May I consider the possibility of one day forgiving you. And as you say these words, notice what happens inside you. Notice, is there a sense of no way? Is there a sense of a little bit of relief? Is there a sense of possibility? Just let whatever is here be here. May I consider the possibility of one day forgiving you. May I forgive you. And maybe notice if there's something that arises that you want to work on with forgiveness, a person, a situation. Just keep note of it. And now turning to the ways that you may have hurt others. We've all hurt others. This is normal. It's so normal. Is there something that you wish that in your mind you could ask forgiveness for? Not something very intense, maybe something moderate or mild. Could have been for cutting off a person in traffic yesterday. Something that you want to ask forgiveness for, just to practice this meditation. And then we can say in our mind, for ways that I hurt you intentionally or unintentionally, may I be forgiven. May I one day be forgiven. May I consider the possibility of asking your forgiveness one day. Just notice how that feels and notice what's happening inside you. And remember, with both of these, we can always add, never would I knowingly allow this to happen again, especially with forgiving others. Never would I knowingly allow this to happen again. Just breathing and sensing what's happening inside you, letting whatever is here be here. And maybe something comes to you like, I'd like to work on this in the future, asking forgiveness for this particular thing, and notice what arises. And keep track of that. Just a little note in your mind. And lastly, ways that I've hurt or harmed myself. And we can just do this more generally, or something may appear in your mind. For ways that I've hurt or harmed myself intentionally or unintentionally, may I forgive myself. May I one day forgive myself. May I consider the possibility of one day forgiving myself. And notice what happens as you say these words. And just right now, if you can bring some kindness to yourself. Maybe there's something for the future that you want to work on. Just take note of that. And just bring some kindness. May I be safe and protected and at ease. Just holding yourself with kindness and compassion for all of the ways that we've been hurt or hurt others or hurt ourselves. It's part of the human condition. And if we can learn that even when hurt happens, there can always be repair. There can always be repair. And just sending out kindness in whatever way feels right to you, or maybe just sending some kindness to yourself. And take a breath or two. And whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes or end the meditation.
Thank you, Diana.
Mm-hmm.
That was beautiful. Beautiful. I have a couple more questions if you don't mind.
Okay.
For somebody who's experienced trauma, who has a very deep wound or hurt or anger or shame or something that's really, really deep, how would you suggest they support themselves or are supported as they want to embark on a forgiveness practice?
So it's really important that when we're dealing with major trauma, that we have outside support, that we don't just jump into this practice. Oh, I'm going to just forgive that person for abusing me. No. You've got to have, whether it's therapy, counseling, something so that you're not walking through this alone. And what I recommend is, I mean, for most people, you need to get to a certain point where it's not so massively triggering before you can do the forgiveness practice. So once your head's out of the water a little bit and you have a little bit of sense of just not being entirely kind of in it, then the forgiveness practice could be brought in.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. One more question. As you were going through the phrases to say, I noticed that there's sort of these concentric circles, and you're starting, it sounds like, with the closest possibility, may I forgive? And then you're opening up to the possibility of forgiving. Why are the circles in that order? Why are the phrases in that order?
That's a good question. It's just sort of how I developed them over the years. I think it's like you try it. May I forgive you? You kind of try it. Oh, that doesn't work. May I one day? It's a little further off. And then you try really further off. And it just gives people a lot of space and options. I guess you could do it in any order, just kind of how it worked out.
That makes perfect sense. I was just curious because it seemed very consistent as you were presenting your practice. Bringing it just down to some brass tacks every day, can you give us some sort of go-to practices, or how do we integrate this in a daily basis? The formal practice is beautiful and can be incorporated. How do we bring this sort of element of forgiveness into our daily life?
So not in your meditation, but in life. Yeah. There's an on-the-spot forgiveness that you can practice. And I was kind of mentioning it earlier, but somebody does something in that moment, you're mad, or you do something and you're, oops, why did I do that? Just in that moment, bring the phrases right in. May I forgive myself? Okay, just take a breath, feel the difficult feelings. Okay. Maybe sometimes we feel shame. Shame is really hard to be mindful of, but we can do it very gently, very lightly. Remember, feel grounded in your hands or feet. feel it a little bit. Okay, I forgive myself. I mean, I do, I'll do this many times during the course of the day, particularly when I do something that hurts somebody else, and I feel awful about it. And I'll just pause. And sometimes I even put my hand on my chest and I'll just say, it's okay. You didn't know. You can forgive yourself. Take a breath. And then oftentimes, not always, but it can dissolve and I move on with life. So, so just make it a live part of how we live.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. Brene Brown has a wonderful phrase, and she talks about the shame storm.
Mm-hmm.
Something can come up and it can trigger that like mushroom cloud of shame where you just know you've done something wrong and you're just like, ugh. And it may not be something so massive, but it just hits you like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
And so I love your description, because what you're describing is taking the time, even in the course of a busy day, to tune in and allow yourself to experience the different emotions and to soften, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got it.
All right. Well, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate everything that you've shared with us today. So I want to thank you for your time, Diana. And also I want to thank everybody who is participating in the Mindful Summit. Thank you very much. I'm with tremendous gratitude. Thank you very much. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.